All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Oh, yeah. One of the all-time greats.
Absolutely. And you guys have given us a ton of material to go through.
We've got articles. We've got interviews.
We're going to break it all down, every single bit of it.
Yeah, this is going to be a wild ride.
We're not just talking about the music.
No.
But the creative clashes, the pressure.
All the drama behind the scenes.
How this project meant to connect with fans
Yeah.
almost destroyed the people who made it.
It really is a story of ambition, and the friction that comes when you try to do something on such a massive scale.
Exactly so. To understand The Wall,
Mm-hmm.
we got to start with the concept itself.
Okay.
Imagine a wall,
Okay.
a metaphorical wall built brick by brick.
Mm-hmm.
Each trauma, each disappointment, another brick,
Wow.
shutting the protagonist off from the world.
And that descent, visually, is brought to life by Gerald Scarfe.
Yeah.
I mean, his artwork, those unforgettable, often disturbing images, really capture the turmoil at the heart of the wall,
His work is incredible.
isn't it?
They saw his animations, right, on the BBC
Yeah.
and thought he was absolutely bonkers.
Oh, for sure.
In a good way.
Absolutely.
And Roger Waters, he played the wall tapes for Scarfe.
Can you imagine?
I mean, that must have been intense.
Waters said he felt totally exposed.
Really?
Like he'd pulled his pants down in front of Scarfe.
Wow.
But that vulnerability, I think, is what led to such a powerful creative partnership.
Yeah, and you can really see how Scarfe was peering right into Waters' mind. Like he
Wow.
was taking Waters' life experiences, the fears, the anxieties, and translating those into these just incredibly powerful visuals.
And it's amazing how those visuals evolved.
Right.
I mean, some of his early ideas were even more graphic, like hangings.
Wow.
And the teacher character vomiting into the students' mouths.
Oh,
Talk about pushing the boundaries.
yeah.
What do you think those visuals would have changed how you experienced the wall?
I mean, that would have been definitely a different experience, I think.
Totally.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, though,
Yeah.
the film production sounds like absolute chaos.
It sounds intense, right?
Scarfe needed a shot of Jack Daniels just to get through the day.
Really?
And Alan Parker, the director, he called it one of the most miserable experiences of his career.
Wow.
I mean, the creative tension must have been through the roof.
It's hard to imagine being in that kind of environment.
Right.
With all these strong personalities.
Clashing.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that tension is part of what makes The Wall so powerful.
That's a great point.
Like, you can feel that struggle in every frame.
It's almost palpable, isn't it?
Right. And speaking of struggle,
Yeah.
the man at the center of it all, Roger Waters,
Mm-hmm.
she had his own demons to wrestle with.
Right. The guy who came up with this whole epic tale of isolation and despair.
He said, touring the album was a piece of cake.
Really?
A dawdle, he called it.
Wow.
But he wasn't talking about the performances themselves. It was
Right.
the lifestyle.
Ah, the rock and roll lifestyle.
All the after parties and temptations that come with being a rock star.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was that excess that made him feel trapped.
Wow. So that feeling of entrapment,
Yes.
that alienation, that's what sparked the idea for The Wall.
It all started with this moment of angst during a Pink Floyd concert.
Really?
Waters felt completely disconnected from the massive crowd, and he actually spat on a fan.
Oh, wow.
He described feeling disgusted with himself, realizing how insane the whole situation was.
I can't even imagine.
And that moment was
Yeah.
like the first brick in the wall.
Right.
From there, it grew into this complex story that weaves together bits of Waters' own life, his difficult childhood, the loss of his father in the war, with the band's history, like Syd Barrett's mental breakdown.
It's deeply personal and incredibly ambitious.
Right, and it's not just personal, it's a commentary on society.
It's right.
Think about the teacher character, for example.
Okay.
Waters saw him as a representation of the harsh educational system he went through.
Mm-hmm.
One that focused on results instead of nurturing students.
That's a message that still resonates today.
Yeah, it's like he's saying that these systems we create can actually contribute to our isolation,
Right.
pushing us further behind the wall.
And that feeling of being trapped, of wanting to break free, that's something that a lot of people connect with no matter their background.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to Waters' own complicated relationship with the project,
Right.
especially the film adaptation.
He wasn't completely happy with the final product.
Really? That's surprising.
He actually admitted to not feeling any sympathy for Pink,
Wow.
the main character.
Oh.
He thought the film was so relentlessly dark that it prevented the audience from connecting with Pink's struggles.
So it's like he created something so intense and personal, he couldn't fully embrace it.
Yeah.
And that makes me wonder, does the wall achieve what Waters intended?
That's a great question.
Did it break down the wall between the artist and the audience, or did it end up building a new one?
We're going to keep exploring that as we go deeper into these sources.
It's a question worth pondering, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question. Like you said, we're going to keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's at the heart of the wall. You know, did it connect or did it further isolate?
Right. And to get a different perspective on that,
Yeah.
let's bring in Roger Ebert,
Okay.
his 1982 review of the film.
Okay.
Ebert, a huge name in film criticism.
Yeah.
He called The Wall disquieting,
Oh, wow.
depressing, and very good.
Interesting combination.
Right.
Right.
But he also compared it to other films that were being made at the time and said The Wall was so daring,
Oh, really?
especially compared to what he called more timid films. And this is 1982 we're talking about.
Yeah.
So to have a film like this come out then,
Yeah.
I mean, it was really something.
It must have been pretty groundbreaking.
Yeah, and he picked up on something that I found really interesting.
Okay, what's that?
None of the main people involved, Waters, Parker, Scarfe, seem to have actually enjoyed making the film.
Really?
They all kind of talked about it in this
Negative
clip.
light, yeah.
Huh. Well, that ties in to, there's a quote that Ebert uses
Okay.
from the director Francois Truffaut,
Hmm.
and he said, I demand that a film express either the joy of making cinema or the agony of making cinema. I am not at all interested in anything in between.
Wow, what a quote.
Right.
What do you think, does the wall achieve that?
That's a good question.
I mean, it definitely expresses agony,
For sure.
but maybe there's this twisted joy in there somewhere too.
Interesting.
This joy of pushing boundaries,
Yeah.
of expressing really complex emotions.
Yeah, maybe it's a different kind of joy.
Right.
Something to think about.
It is, definitely.
And speaking of complex emotions,
Yeah.
we can't forget about Bob Geldof
Yes. Bob Geldof.
and his portrayal of Pink in the film. Originally, Waters wanted to play the part himself.
Oh, wow.
He even envisioned incorporating live concert footage,
Interesting.
but then, he was deemed unsuitable for the role.
Okay.
They brought in Geldof,
Right.
scrapped those ideas.
What a different film that would have been.
Right.
Can you imagine?
Waters literally playing out his own internal struggles on screen.
Yeah, I wonder if it would have felt almost too literal,
Right.
too on the nose.
Yeah.
Bringing in Geldof allowed for kind of a different interpretation.
Yes.
A little distance from the source material, maybe.
It's like another layer of the wall metaphor, right?
Interesting.
Geldof's Pink is separated from Waters' Pink.
It's like a double wall.
Right. And speaking of layers,
Yeah.
the production itself had some fascinating details.
Okay, like what?
The war scenes were filmed on Saunton Sands in North Devon.
Where's that?
It's this beach that was actually later featured on the cover of Pink Floyd's A Momentary Lapse of Reason.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
So there's this like visual echo
Yeah.
of the wall in their later work.
And there's that scene where Geldof smashes up the hotel room
Yeah.
and he cuts his hand.
Yeah.
That wasn't fake. He actually injured himself.
Oh, wow.
They kept it in the film.
Oh, that's intense.
I know. And remember how I mentioned Waters originally wanted to include concert footage?
Yes.
Well, there was also this song
Yeah.
called Hey You
Yeah.
that was supposed to be in the film, but they cut it
Why?
because they thought the footage was too repetitive.
Oh, interesting.
It's amazing to think about all the things that end up on the cutting room floor.
Right. All the choices that have to be made
Yeah.
when you're making something like this.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the scale of the stage show.
I mean, building a giant wall on stage, that's insane.
Insane. They had this massive lift system
Mm-hmm.
to build the wall. And apparently it was so complex and loud that they had to run it constantly, like for days,
Really?
just to break it in.
Wow.
And get rid of this like horrible grinding noise.
They were serious about it.
They were messing around.
No.
And they used all sorts of crazy elements like inflatable puppets,
Yeah.
pyrotechnics
Wow.
to create these really vivid images.
It's like a fusion of rock music and theater.
Yeah.
It was a spectacle.
Waters was really adamant about the show having a clear narrative arc,
Okay.
a beginning, a middle, and end.
Yeah.
He wanted the audience to be completely immersed.
Wow. And I heard that when that wall finally came crashing down at the end, people in the front rows were actually terrified.
That's incredible.
Like they were experiencing that sense of release, that breaking down of barriers on like a visceral level.
Waters said the early days of touring were really special for him.
How so?
You know, playing smaller venues, he felt this genuine connection with the audience.
That's nice.
This shared experience.
There's something about those smaller, more intimate shows. You can feel the energy in a different way.
But then, you know, Pink Floyd got bigger and bigger, playing to these massive crowds.
Right.
That sense of connection started to fade.
Which is kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that feeling of alienation, being lost in the crowd, that's what inspired The Wall in the first place.
Right, full circle.
Yeah.
The thing he was trying to express through his art became amplified by his success.
Wow.
That tension, that struggle to connect, that really comes through in The Wall, both the album and the film.
It's a central theme for sure.
And for me, it raises the question again, did The Wall actually achieve what Waters set out to do?
Right. Did it break down those barriers?
Or did it just create new ones?
It's a question each listener has to answer for themselves. I think there's no right or wrong answer.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right?
Exactly.
It's not about finding like definitive answers. It's about exploring the complexities, the contradictions.
The human
stories behind the art.
And speaking of human stories, let's go back to Gerald Scarfe for a minute.
Okay.
He had a really interesting perspective on the lasting impact of his work on The Wall.
Yeah, he talked about how his political cartoons have a very short shelf life.
Right.
But the images he created for The Wall, they've endured for decades.
I mean, they've become iconic.
It's true. He even said that seeing his work come to life in Roger Waters' recent The Wall tour gave him a real rush.
Like he was part of this massive spectacle, this piece of theater that transcends generations.
It's like bigger than just him, you know? It's connected with people on such a deep level.
And it's interesting how he contrasts that with his political cartoons.
Right.
Which, you know, very kind of a short shelf life.
Yeah, very topical of the moment.
But the images from The Wall, they've just endured, you know, for decades.
It's wild.
Amazing.
He's even had fans tell him that The Wall, the album or the film, changed their lives.
Oh, wow.
Which is really powerful.
Incredible.
To think about how art can have that kind of impact.
Right. Like the reach that it has. It can touch people across generations, across cultures.
And I think it speaks to the themes of The Wall, you know, the isolation, the alienation, the pressures of society. We all grapple with those things.
We do on some level.
In some way, yeah.
It's part of the human experience, I think.
I think so too. And I think that's why The Wall is still so relevant.
Right.
You know, decades later.
It's timeless in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that brings us back to, you know, the question we've been asking this whole time.
Yeah.
Did The Wall, with all its darkness and conflict, actually achieve what Roger Waters intended?
Did it break down the walls between artist and audience, or did it just create new ones? I mean, that's a question, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I don't know if we have a clear answer.
I don't think there is a clear answer, no.
But I think going through these sources, all these articles and interviews, it's given me a much deeper appreciation for how complex that question is.
Absolutely, and it's not a simple yes or no, is it?
Right.
The Wall it's a challenging piece of work.
It is.
It's dark, it's intense, it's sometimes uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly powerful, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And it sparks these important conversations about the human condition.
Exactly. And maybe that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not about breaking down the wall completely, but just acknowledging that it exists.
Right.
Starting a dialogue.
Yeah.
Making us think critically about the barriers that we build.
I like that, yeah.
Both internally, you know, in our own lives and externally in the world.
And for you, the listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some new insights into The Wall.
Yeah.
Maybe even a new perspective on it.
And maybe even inspired you to go back and listen to the album again.
Or watch the film.
Yeah.
Think about all the things we talked about.
The creative clashes, the pressures, the ambition.
Because sometimes understanding the context, the human stories behind the art, can make it even more meaningful, I think.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep diving deep.